At the one-on-one engagement, my parents laughed at my imaginary fiancé, so I made a toast, discreetly, but waited until he walked in saying, "Sorry for being late, I had to park the helicopter," without them knowing we had just landed from Dubai. I am 34 years old, a woman, from a traditional Indian American family based in Northern California. My upbringing was deeply rooted in going to college, preferably Stanford or Berkeley, becoming a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, marrying young, having 2 kids and living within a 30-mile radius of my parents, so they could babysit the kids on weekends and inspect my spice rack. I derailed that script around the age of 21 when I chose to study design instead of medicine. That was the first strike. The second strike was when I dropped out of graduate school after landing a job with a global marketing firm in Berlin. My parents, Arvind and Priya, didn't take it well. To them, being freelance translated to being unemployed, and remote consulting sounded like sitting around all day on a laptop wasting time. Every time we talked, I felt like I had to justify my life choices. But the biggest strike? Telling them I was engaged and they couldn't meet him yet. They had always been skeptical about my love life. I dated people outside of the community, didn't bother introducing anyone unless it was serious, and when I met said, then a pilot and aeronautics consultant based between Sweden and Qatar, I waited almost a year before telling my family. When I finally did, my mother's first response was, "Why haven't we met him? Are you sure he's real?" It would have been funny if she didn't actually believe I was lying. Fast forward to last December, my cousin Dia, 29 years old, was getting engaged. Her fiancé, Arman, was an Ivy League-educated heart surgeon who ticked all the boxes of the perfect Indian son-in-law. The engagement party was held in a massive banquet hall in San Jose, sparing no expense, a 3-day event with catered buffets, choreographed dances, henna stations, even a sitar performance at brunch. I wasn't surprised to receive the invitation, only surprised that it included a sarcastic postscript from my mother. "Hope your fiancé can come this time," smiley face, yes, said, and I had already planned to be in the United States for a few weeks over the holidays. He had business meetings in Palo Alto, and we were visiting some of my friends in Los Angeles. We landed at SFO from Dubai 2 days before the event. He had to attend a last-minute meeting on the afternoon of the engagement but promised to meet me there for dinner. The detail? We were flying in by helicopter, as he was borrowing a friend's aircraft to travel, something that sounds over the top but was legitimately easier than dealing with Bay Area traffic and back-to-back events. I arrived at the venue alone. From the moment I walked in, it started, the whispers, the forced smiles, the questions I've come to expect from extended family. "Where is your fiancé? What does he do again? Have you thought about freezing your eggs? We're just worried, Anika, you're such a free spirit." I bit my tongue, smiled, took selfies with Dia, tried to focus on her, on being one-on-one supportive. But then I heard my mother standing at a cocktail table near the bar, laughing with her sister, Dia's mom, and some aunts. "I've stopped asking," she said. "She says he's in aviation." I said, "What does that even mean? Is he a flight attendant?" "She never shows pictures." I told Arvind, "Maybe he's imaginary." They all laughed, not subtle laughs, open-mouthed cackles. "Can you believe this girl?" they laughed. I held a glass of sparkling water, trying to keep my hand from shaking. I should have walked away. Instead, I stood there, letting it wash over me. There was nothing left to say to them. But I knew what was coming. When the toasts began after dinner, I was asked to say a few words. I think the planner just assumed everyone would, Dia's friends, Arman's cousins, even Neil, my younger brother with whom I hadn't spoken in months, said a few words about finding the right person. Everyone looked at me when I took the microphone. I wore a wine-colored silk sari, hair pinned up, gold jewelry, minimalist but elegant. I stood there and looked at a sea of faces who had never believed in me. I hadn't rehearsed. "I'll be brief," I said. "I just want to say that it's beautiful to see 2 people who are supported, celebrated, and believed in. Not everyone has that, so if you do, hold on to it." There was a polite applause. And then it happened. A loud mechanical buzzing, at first faint, then unmistakable. It was the sound of helicopter rotors. People began to murmur. My aunt looked out the window, confused. The planner ran towards the door, and then said walked in. He was wearing a navy blue tailored suit, no tie, his watch glinting under the chandelier lights, his hair slightly tousled by the wind. He looked out of place, but in a way that made everyone else seem underdressed. "Sorry for being late," he said with a smile. "I had to park the helicopter." Someone actually gasped, and then he walked straight towards me and kissed my forehead. "I missed your toast," he asked softly. "No," I said, "you're right on time." The room had changed. I didn't have to look around to know it. The temperature of the attention had shifted. It was no longer tinged with skepticism, judgment, or that particular brand of false courtesy I had grown used to at these events. Now people were curious, alert, their eyes following Said as he politely introduced himself to the people nearest to where we were standing, including my aunt, Dia's mother, who suddenly seemed unsure of how to rearrange her facial expression quickly enough, and my mother. Her hands fidgeted with the edge of her dupatta, her mouth slightly open, as if she couldn't decide whether to smile or stay in that half-smile of disbelief she had been wearing before. Said greeted her without hesitation. "Priya auntie, it's very nice to finally meet you," he said, warmly extending a hand. She took a little longer than necessary before accepting the handshake. "Oh," she said, "yes, of course, hello." I had heard her use that exact tone with neighbors she didn't really like but needed to maintain civility with, the ones with barking dogs or too many lawn ornaments. Said turned to my father, who stood a few feet behind her, more composed but equally surprised. "Arband uncle," he nodded, "I've heard a lot about you." My father gave him a firm handshake, masking his discomfort better than my mother, but I saw it, just a flicker in his eyes, a tightness around his jaw. He was evaluating Said the way he did with potential business partners or unknown real estate developers. "I understand you work in aviation?" he asked. Said nodded. "Yes, mainly consulting now, projects in Europe, the Gulf, and Asia, but I still fly occasionally. Keeps me grounded, ironically." Some nearby people laughed, not because it was especially funny, but because they were suddenly recalibrating. I was no longer the defiant daughter who had invented an international fiancé to save face at family events. I was the mysterious cousin who arrived alone and whose partner descended from the sky like an unexpected plot twist. Though, it wasn't really about the helicopter. Well, maybe it was a little about the helicopter, but mostly, it was about presence, about showing up, and Said had done so in a way that no one in that room could ignore. While he was pulled into introductions by some of my second cousins and curious uncles who suddenly found his work fascinating, I took a moment to observe the scene. It was surreal. I had spent years walking into rooms like these, silently bracing for judgment, and now I was the storm. My cousin Neil, still smug from his earlier speech, approached me during dessert. "So," he said, "that's your guy?" I looked at him, a little tired but unwilling to let the moment slip. "Yes," I said, "yes, that's Said." He gave a short laugh. I really didn't think he was real, to be honest. "Yeah," I said, "a lot of people didn't." He paused, maybe to apologize, maybe to change the subject, but I didn't give him the chance. I walked away to check on Dia instead. To her credit, she didn't seem at all bothered by the attention Said's entrance had drawn. She had always been good about that, gracefully centered, with just enough rebellion in her to quietly support me, even if she never said much to her mother. She squeezed my hand as I approached. "Best moment of the night," she whispered. "I wasn't trying to overshadow you," I said honestly. "You didn't," she replied, "you just reclaimed your place, and it was about time." Later that night, my mother pulled me aside near the staircase leading to the balcony area. She seemed unsettled but also curious. "Why didn't you tell us he was coming?" she asked. I shrugged. Would it have changed anything? She hesitated. I didn't realize. Realize what? I asked, arms crossed. She looked at her hands, then back at me. I didn't realize it was that serious. And there it was, the weight of every conversation we never had, every moment I tried to explain my life and was met with worry, doubt, rejection. The way they made me feel like I was misinterpreting adulthood because I wasn't following the script. But she was trying now, awkwardly, slowly, but trying. "I'm glad you came," she added after a moment. "Me too," I said, and I meant it. Not for them, for me. I found myself a little later in the rooftop garden attached to the venue. It was quieter up there, away from the lights, the cameras, and the endless buffet lines. He wrapped his arms around me from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder. "How was it?" he asked. I smiled, watching the skyline glitter in the distance. "Better than I expected," I said. "Worse than it should have been." He didn't say anything for a moment. "Then, they'll catch up." "I'm not waiting," I said. "I know," he replied, pulling me closer. We stayed there a little longer. The music below us had shifted to something slower, the conversations softer, carried into the night like the wind. I didn't know what would happen next with my family, if they would try more, if this night would really change anything. But I knew this, for once, they saw me. And more importantly, I saw myself. Said and I stayed on that rooftop until almost everyone had left. The stars were faint over the Bay Area haze, but the air beneath us had cleared. The party had dwindled to that strange period when the aunts begin packing Tupperware and the uncles linger with whiskey glasses, not ready to leave but no longer adding anything to the conversation either. We watched it all from above, like spectators of a play we no longer needed to act in. Finally, we went down to say goodbye to Dia and Armin. They were on the dance floor again, slightly tipsy and glowing with the ease of people who didn't have to fight for approval. I hugged Dia tightly. "You did great," I said. "You too," she replied. "You have no idea how satisfying that was for me." We both laughed. Armin offered said a fist bump, and said responded with that quiet, calm confidence he always carried. As we headed towards the valet line, I could feel my parents' eyes on us from across the room. They didn't say much as we left. My father gave a polite nod. My mother gave said a tight-lipped smile that almost passed for warmth. It was fine. I wasn't expecting transformation. But I also knew something had shifted. Maybe not dramatically, not overnight, but tectonically. When we got back to the hotel, I took off the sari, wiped the kajal from my eyes, and collapsed onto the bed with a dramatic groan. "That bad?" Said asked, half out of his suit, the tie tossed on the couch. "Not bad," I said, staring at the ceiling. "Just heavy." Have you ever walked into a room where everyone pretends you're invisible, and then suddenly they're trying to memorize your resume? He laughed. "Yeah, most rooms, actually." I laughed too, because that was part of why we worked. He understood things I never had to explain twice. "Do you regret it?" he asked after a pause. "What?" "Tonight. Coming." I sat up slightly, leaning on my elbows. "No. Not for a second." Because the truth is, even with all the attention, the passive-aggressive comments, the long years of being sidelined and misunderstood, this moment, this shift, was something I needed. Not to validate my life or my relationship, but to face what had been hanging over me for years. Said lay next to me, one arm behind his head. "You didn't need me to prove anything," he said quietly. "You already had." Maybe. But it still helped. The following days were strange. There were no explosive consequences, no big confrontations, no sudden dinner invitations or emotional apologies. But things started to happen, small things. My father sent me a link to a Forbes real estate article saying, "Reminds me of one of the projects you mentioned." Interesting read. My mother sent a message in the family group chat with a photo from the engagement party, one where said and I were standing near the stage, smiling. Look who finally made it into the family album. It was the first time she acknowledged him publicly. My aunt, Dia's mother, the one who had laughed the loudest at the imaginary fiancé joke, sent me a friend request on Facebook and liked 3 of my old travel photos from Jordan and Croatia. Even Neil sent a message. "Neil, hey, sorry if I've been a jerk." That was impressive. Not sure if that's an apology or a TED Talk opener. Let's go with both. I didn't respond, not immediately, but I saw it for what it was, an olive branch wrapped in typical older brother sarcasm. One afternoon, back in San Mateo, I visited my childhood home for a quick drop-off. My mother had left some items she wanted me to pick up, a few pieces of jewelry from an old box, a shawl that had belonged to my grandmother, a pressure cooker she insisted was too premium to ship overseas. Said stayed in the car, scrolling on his phone while I went inside. Inside, the house looked the same. It still smelled of incense and cilantro. The framed family portraits in the hallway had been updated. The newer ones included Dia and Armin, and one recent edition showed Sid and me at the engagement, side by side, smiling. I paused. "You printed this?" I asked when my mother walked into the hallway. She looked at the photo, then at me. "Dia emailed it," she said. "I liked it. It's a good photo." "It is." There was a long silence. She adjusted a vase on the console table, though it didn't need adjusting. "I may have misjudged," she finally said. She seemed thoughtful, unsure of how to respond. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest we had ever been. "I never needed you to be impressed," I said. "I just needed you to stop assuming I was lying." She didn't argue, for once. "You've always done things differently," she said. "That's hard for us to understand. But maybe different doesn't mean wrong." It was an incomplete moment, but still a crack in the wall. I took the box she handed me, hugged her briefly, and left before either of us could ruin it by saying too much. When I got back to the car, Sid looked at me. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah." He didn't press further. That's another reason I love him. He knows that sometimes silence is the strongest kind of peace. We flew back to Dubai a few days later. The trip had exhausted me emotionally in ways I hadn't fully processed until we landed back on our own ground, the warm, dry air hitting my face, and the hum of Arabic and English blending in the background. The city was loud, alive, unapologetically bold, so different from the quieter, cautious version of myself I often became in my parents' world. Sid and I didn't talk about the engagement party for a while. We didn't need to. The trip had done what it needed to do, and now we were back to the rhythm we knew: late dinners on the balcony, weekends at the marina, flights to meetings in Riyadh or Paris. We were back to us. But something lingered. Not bitterness, not even the need for approval anymore. It was the itch of unfinished business. Back in California, my parents had taken small steps toward acknowledging my life, but they had never really understood what I had built or what it had cost me. For years they had mocked and doubted, confident in the superiority of their path. They didn't believe I was capable of doing something real, of making something mine. And I didn't just want them to come around, I wanted them to see me win, loudly and undeniably. And from that, the idea was born. A few months after our return, Sid and I were invited to speak at a high-profile business summit in Dubai. He was going to give a talk on aviation logistics in emerging markets. I was being honored for my branding consultancy, which had just reached a 7-figure milestone after signing a contract with a major luxury conglomerate. They wanted a speaker to talk about building personal brands across cultures and scaling without venture capital funding, and they chose me. I told them I'd do it on one condition, that I could invite guests. The event organizers agreed. I sent 2 priority invitations to my parents with a handwritten note. "You once asked if I took my life seriously. I'd like to show you what seriousness looks like." They didn't respond for 3 days. Then I got a text from my mother, "We'll be there." When they arrived in Dubai, Sid picked them up in our Tesla, not the helicopter, we'd already done that, and brought them to our home, a sleek 3-bedroom apartment overlooking the Palm, with floor-to-ceiling windows and an open kitchen. My mother's eyes jumped from the modern lighting to the Moroccan tiles. My father tried not to comment, but I saw it, the surprise, the disbelief, the recalibration. They hadn't imagined this. They thought I lived like a bohemian expat with mismatched furniture and student loan debt, not like someone who hosted investor dinners on her rooftop and signed NDAs with billionaire clients. The following night, at the summit, I stood on stage in a tailored white pantsuit, hair pinned up, every inch the woman I had fought to become. I told my story, not about family drama, not directly, but about rejection, resilience, and being underestimated. About having the audacity to believe my work was valid, even when no one else did. I spoke about building my own table when none had a seat for me, and my parents were in the front row. My mother had tears in her eyes. My father clapped a little longer than the rest. After the talk, people came up to congratulate me, entrepreneurs, executives, even minor royals. My father was nearby, shaking hands like he was at one of his own business conferences. That night, during dinner, my mother turned to Seth and said, "Thank you for supporting her, for believing in her when we didn't." He smiled politely but didn't say, "You're welcome," because it wasn't about them anymore. The real revenge wasn't making them feel jealous, it was making them irrelevant to my success. I didn't need their approval, but it was satisfying, so deeply satisfying, to see the doubt in their eyes replaced by awe. To see them realize that I hadn't just landed on my feet, I had flown. Later that week, before they returned to California, my father pulled me aside on the balcony. "You've done well," he said. "I didn't see it before, but you've built something." I looked at him, this man who once told me that art and design were hobbies, not careers, who had offered to pay for me to go back to grad school just 2 years ago because he was worried I'd end up alone. "I know," I said. He nodded, then added, "I'm proud of you." It took 34 years to hear that. And by the time he said it, I no longer needed it. But I accepted it anyway. That, to me, was the best kind of revenge, not the helicopter, not the speech, not the business class tickets or the ocean view from my kitchen. The revenge was becoming the person they never imagined I could be, and then giving them a front row seat. Did you enjoy the story? Leave your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos on the channel. Until next time.